I knew something was off the second I heard the jackhammer at 7 in the morning on a Saturday. I live on a private road, emphasis on private owned and maintained entirely by me and the 5 other homeowners who chipped in for pavement work last spring. So when I saw a crew of orange-vested guys setting up cones and dragging rebar across the road, I grabbed my coffee and stormed out the front door in my boots and bathrobe. "Hey!" I shouted, stepping into the middle of the drive. "What the hell is going on here?" One of the workers glanced up from the rebar he was bolting into the pavement. "Speed bumps," he said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Ordered by the HOA." My stomach dropped. I looked up and, of course, standing there like she owned the place was Phyllis Bradford, president of the Willow Creek HOA and self-declared traffic enforcer of the world. Her bleach-blonde bob was practically glowing in the sun, and she had that smug little clipboard clutched to her chest like it was a badge. "Phyllis," I said, walking straight toward her. "This is a private road. This road doesn't belong to Willow Creek HOA. You can't do this." She didn't even blink. "Derek, I'm doing what's best for the community. Residents have complained about people speeding through here." "Yeah, which residents? This isn't even your jurisdiction." "Oh, please," she huffed. "The HOA has an easement agreement." "No, it doesn't," I said. "And you know that. We had this argument 2 years ago when you tried to make us paint our fences beige." "Well, we're putting safety first now. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the board." I laughed. "I'm not under your board." She turned and waved to the workers. "Keep going," she barked. "Install all 5. That's when I went back inside, grabbed my phone, and called the sheriff. By the time Deputy Harlan rolled up 20 minutes later, they'd already poured concrete for 2 speed bumps and were prepping a 3rd. "Morning, gentlemen," Harlan said, stepping out of his cruiser. "Got a call about unauthorized construction on private property?" "Right here," I said, arms crossed. Phyllis strutted over. "Deputy Harlan, this is HOA-approved work. It's for safety." "On a private road?" he asked, tilting his head. "Whose name is on the property deed?" "Mine," I said, pulling out the printed copy I'd grabbed from my filing cabinet. "And 5 of my neighbors. No HOA involvement, no easement. Nothing." Harlan took the paper, read closely, then looked at Phyllis. "You got permission from the property owners, ma'am." "We don't need permission," she snapped. "We represent the community." "Actually, you do need permission. This is clearly private land. You're violating trespassing laws and possibly committing property damage." Phyllis's face turned red. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," he said, walking over to the workers. "Pack it up, fellas, and you're gonna need to remove what's already been done." "You're kidding," she gasped. "I'm not," he said. "And if you don't get these speed bumps off this road by sundown, I'll be back with citations and maybe handcuffs." I didn't say a word. I just stood there and watched her stare at the concrete like it had betrayed her, and you better believe that was just the beginning. By Sunday morning, the concrete was still there, 2 partially formed speed bumps drying like tumors on the asphalt. The construction crew had vanished the minute Deputy Harlan gave the order, leaving behind orange cones, a wheelbarrow, and a crushed box of powdered donuts. I stood at the edge of the mess with my neighbor, Celia, who co-owned the stretch of road with me. She was in her gardening gloves, holding her phone horizontally, filming everything. "Document everything," she muttered. "If they so much as breathe on this road again, I want it recorded." "They're already in deep," I said, crouching to inspect the raw concrete. "This isn't just trespassing, it's vandalism." "They didn't even notify us." Celia zoomed in on a small metal rebar loop protruding from the top of the hardened mound. "They poured this right over the drainage cut. This could flood the whole lower end of the road if it rains." I stood up slowly. "That's not just reckless. That's sabotage." We both turned at the sound of tires crunching gravel. A silver Lexus glided up, and out stepped none other than Greg Talbot, the HOA vice president. Greg always wore slacks, no matter the weather, and today was no exception. He adjusted his aviators and took a long look at the concrete. Didn't expect you to be up so early, he said, aiming for casual. I live here, I said, crossing my arms. What's your excuse? I came to assess the situation. The board didn't think it would escalate like this. Define this, Celia said, lowering her phone but not turning it off. Greg shifted uncomfortably. The plan was to improve safety. Installations were supposed to be temporary. Temporary speed bumps, I said. You poured reinforced concrete, he hesitated. The board had assumptions about road usage rights. Assumptions don't hold up in court, Celia snapped, and you have no legal jurisdiction here. Didn't stop you from hiring a contractor and damaging our property. Greg ran a hand through his thinning hair. Look, I can talk to Phillies. Maybe we can, we're past talking, I said. You poured concrete on private land without consent. That's criminal trespass and property damage. You're lucky the sheriff didn't cuff you yesterday. Greg's jaw tightened. Let's be reasonable. Reasonable would have been knocking on our doors before tearing up the pavement, Celia said. You're going to fix this. Fast. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Without another word, he turned and climbed back into his car. The Lexus pulled a sharp U-turn and disappeared down the hill. Later that afternoon, I drove to the county records office. I needed more than just the deed copies I already had. I wanted the original subdivision layout, the road maintenance agreements from the 80s, anything that predated the HOA's formation. If they were going to keep pushing, I needed irrefutable proof that this road was never under their jurisdiction. The clerk, a guy named Harold who looked like he'd been filing documents since Reagan's first term, took one look at the parcel number and nodded. Ah, that stretch. I remember when it was still gravel. You're looking for development docs. Everything from zoning to utility easements, I said. If it mentions the HOA, I want it. He dug through 2 drawers, then handed me a thick manila folder. Knock yourself out. An hour later, I was back home, flipping through photocopies on my kitchen table. There it was, black and white, Section 3, Paragraph 2. Access road remains under private ownership, to be maintained by parcels 17 through 23. No governing authority, including but not limited to Willow Creek Homeowners Association, shall assume control or levy restrictions. I scanned it, saved it, printed 3 copies, and emailed a 4th to my attorney friend, Carla, who owed me a favor after I helped her brother replace his transmission last winter. By Monday morning, things got worse. A flatbed truck rolled in carrying a bobcat and 2 men in Willow Creek maintenance polos. They weren't removing the speed bumps. They were trying to finish them. I stepped outside, phone already recording. You better turn that machine off. The driver looked confused. Phillies said we had the green light. Phillies doesn't own this road, I said. This is private property and you're trespassing. The second guy, younger and clearly less comfortable, stepped down from the trailer. We're just doing what we're told. Then tell Phillies she's about to be named in a police report. Before either of them could respond, Celia appeared from her porch, holding a long level and a folder of documents. We've got paper proof, she said. And you've been filmed trespassing. They hesitated. I pointed to the edge of the property. You've got 30 seconds to leave. They left. But not before I got their license plate on camera and the company name on the side of the truck. At noon, I met Carla at the county courthouse. She was already filing a cease and desist order and prepping a civil suit for damages. She had a binder with the photos Celia took, the recorded video, and the property documents I'd pulled. They're cooked, she said, flipping through the evidence. This isn't just a fine. They committed unauthorized construction on land they don't own. That's a felony in this county. They've gotten away with stuff for years, I said. This is different. Very, she said. And we're going to make an example out of them. By Tuesday, the sheriff's office had launched an investigation, not just for the speed bumps, but for the HOA's use of community funds to pay the construction crew. Turns out, Phillies hadn't used her own money. She'd submitted a fake invoice listing the road as part of a shared community asset. That was fraud. Deputy Harlan came by with a warrant. They raided the HOA office, seizing documents and files. Phyllis wasn't home that night. Rumor was she'd gone to her sister's place out in Pine Hollow. But Greg was around and he looked wrecked. His mailbox was overflowing with letters. Residents were furious. Some had gotten wind of the misuse of funds. At least 6 had already filed formal complaints with the state HOA Oversight Board. By Thursday, a contractor crew this time hired by us showed up to grind down the concrete mounds. Celia and I stood with folding chairs and lemonade while they did the job right. They even patched the drainage cut and resealed the asphalt. As the sun dipped low, Celia leaned back and said, "You think they'll try again?" "No," I said. "Next time they try something, it won't be with concrete, it'll be paper. Then we'll be ready." We weren't just ready, we were building a case. By the end of the week, I was getting phone calls from neighbors I barely knew. Some were furious about their HOA dues being funneled into illegal projects. Others just wanted to know if they'd be dragged into whatever legal mess was brewing. I told them the truth. If they hadn't authorized anything, and most hadn't, they probably wouldn't be. But the deeper we dug, the more tangled things got. Celia, for one, had started pulling the HOA's annual meeting minutes from the last 5 years. She shared them with Carla and me over dinner at my place Saturday night. The 3 of us sat around my kitchen counter, flipping through pages covered in vague budget lines and generic project descriptions. "Look here," Celia said, pointing to a highlighted section. "This line item just says infrastructure enhancements phase I. That's from 2 years ago. No specifics on what, where, or how much." Carla nodded slowly. "And here's the kicker, these minutes were never signed by a quorum. That means no official approval. At best, it's sloppy bookkeeping. At worst, embezzlement," I finished. "They've been pulling this off under the radar." Carla tapped her pen against the table. "If they've been misappropriating funds long enough, this isn't just a local problem. This could trigger a forensic audit from the state's Property Oversight Commission." I leaned back in my chair. "And you think they'd go that far?" She didn't even blink. "If we give them a reason to." The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office again this time to request copies of publicly filed HOA financial disclosures. The clerk, a different one this time named Sandy, raised an eyebrow when I gave the association's name. "You're the 3rd person this week asking for Willow Creek's filings," she said. "Guess they're getting popular." She handed me a flash drive. "Everything from the past 6 years is on here. You'll want to pay close attention to the vendor contracts." I spent the entire afternoon digging through the files. That's when I found it. A construction invoice submitted 6 months ago, same contractor that poured the speed bumps, showing payment for municipal-grade traffic control devices. The invoice was stamped and signed by Phyllis as authorized HOA officer. But the address listed wasn't part of Willow Creek at all. It was ours, my road, our private road. I forwarded the file to Carla immediately. She called within minutes. She forged the jurisdiction. That's a 2nd-degree felony. If she claimed legal authority over land she doesn't govern to process payments. She's done. By Monday, the district attorney's office had opened a formal investigation. Carla helped draft the complaint, attaching the forged invoice, the property records, and our video evidence. The DA's investigator, a woman named Tasha Marlin, called me that afternoon. "We've seen shady HOAs before," she said. "But this one's got a whole paper trail of fabricated authority. We're building a case for fraud, conspiracy, and misappropriation of funds." "Will it stick?" I asked. "If half of what you gave us checks out, it'll do more than stick." "It'll bury them." On Tuesday morning, Willow Creek's HOA office was locked up tight. But that evening, something strange happened. A white SUV pulled up to my house and parked across the street. A man in a cheap suit got out, walked straight up my driveway, and rang my bell. He was holding a clipboard and wore a badge clipped to his belt, not a police badge, but one from a private legal firm. "You Derek Cole?" he asked. "Who's asking?" "I'm serving you a cease and desist. You've been making defamatory statements about my client, Mrs. Phillies Bradford, and interfering with HOA operations. I took the paper, scanned it, then laughed. This isn't even legitimate, I said. Your client committed fraud. You might want to check with the DA before handing out threats. He didn't respond, just turned and walked away. I called Carla the second he left. They're trying to scare us. They're bluffing, she said. That's a civil scare tactic, not even enforceable. I'll file a counter motion to have it dismissed, and I'll add it to the DA's file for intimidation. Wednesday brought bigger news. Deputy Harlan stopped by with an update. You'll want to hear this one in person, he said, standing in the doorway with a stern face. What's going on? Your HOA president was arrested this morning. I blinked. Phillies, she turned herself in. She's being charged with falsifying legal documents, unauthorized disbursement of funds, and criminal misrepresentation of jurisdiction. Judge refused bail until arraignment. I stared at him. How long have you been sitting on that? About 20 minutes. He grinned for the first time in days. I figured you'd want to hear it from me. Celia came over that evening with champagne. We didn't pop it yet, but we did toast with plastic cups just to mark the moment. Feels like a small win, she said. It's not small, I replied. It's the first real consequence she's ever faced. But we weren't done. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following week. With Phillies gone and Greg barely communicating with anyone, the rest of the board scrambled to salvage what was left of their credibility. They sent out flyers begging residents to attend, promising transparency, accountability, and a path forward. I went. So did Celia. So did over 50 other homeowners, most of them fed up. The meeting was held in the community center, usually empty except for yoga classes and birthday parties. This time it was standing room only. Greg stood at the front, visibly sweating, holding a microphone like it was a live grenade. As acting president, he began, I want to acknowledge the recent challenges we've faced. A man in the back shouted, call it what it is. You stole from us, a woman near the front added. You let her do it. You signed off on everything, Greg stammered. We were misled, no, I said, cutting in. You were complicit. You approved projects outside your jurisdiction. You spent our dues without oversight. And now you want to pretend you didn't know you were on the signature lines. He looked like he might melt. I didn't realize the extent. The state will decide what you realized, Carla said, stepping forward from the crowd. But the board's negligence is clear. You violated your own bylaws. And the residents deserve better. Someone shouted, we want a full audit, another voice, and a new board. The room erupted. Greg tried to speak again, but it was over. A motion was made, seconded, and voted on live, in that moment to suspend all existing board members pending investigation and appoint an interim committee of residents to oversee operations. Celia was voted in unanimously. Afterward, she looked at me with a half nod. I didn't want this job. You earned it, I said, and someone has to clean up the mess. That night, as I stood on my front porch, I watched a few cars drive slowly down the road. No speed bumps, no cones, no construction equipment, just clean pavement and quiet air. And for the first time in weeks, the neighborhood felt like ours again. Celia's first official act as interim chair of the Oversight Committee was to hire a forensic auditor. Not someone local. Either she brought in a woman named Dana Valenti, a tough-as-nails CPA from 2 counties over with a reputation for sniffing out misappropriated funds like a bloodhound. Dana didn't bother with pleasantries. She showed up in a gray blazer, carried 3 laptops, and set up shop in the community center's back office. By the end of her second day, she'd already flagged 4 years' worth of questionable expenditures, including a consulting fee to a company that didn't seem to exist, and several inflated invoices for landscaping work that never happened. On the 3rd day, she called Celia and me in. I need to show you something, she said, tapping her screen. This file was buried inside a general ledger folder labeled Budget Projections. It's encrypted, but I already cracked it. She turned the screen toward us. The file was a spreadsheet, but the contents didn't match any legitimate budget. It logged HOA dues collected, then listed a second column labeled discretionary allocation. The numbers didn't match any public records. Nearly $20,000 had been quietly siphoned over the past year alone. "Where did it go?" Celia asked. Dana clicked over to a second tab. "Wire transfers." All routed to an account opened under a shell nonprofit Willow Creek Neighborhood Safety Alliance. Except that organization doesn't exist with the state. I checked. The bank account is real, though, and here's where it gets ugly: it's registered to a Robert M. Bradford. I leaned in. "Phyllis's husband," Dana nodded. "He's not officially on the HOA board, never was, but it looks like he's been using the association as a personal ATM. Celia stared at the screen. "How did no one catch this?" Dana leaned back. "Because the real books were only ever shown to 3 board members. The rest got sanitized versions, and the residents? They just saw the annual summary, vague numbers, no backup." I stood up and paced. "This is beyond HOA violations. This is wire fraud, embezzlement, maybe even conspiracy to defraud." Dana folded her arms. "I already sent it to the DA's office." That same afternoon, 2 plainclothes investigators from the Financial Crimes Division showed up. They scanned and bagged Dana's laptop, copied the hard drive, and took her notes. By Friday, Robert Bradford was arrested while trying to withdraw funds from the account. He'd used his own name, thinking no one would be watching. They froze the assets before he could move anything. The news broke fast. Local papers ran headlines like "HOA power couple accused in financial scheme" and "Private road battle uncovers major fraud." Residents who had barely spoken to each other before were forming new email chains and planning community meetings without HOA involvement. Meanwhile, the county attorney's office filed a civil suit to seize the Bradfords' assets and liquidate the fake nonprofit. They also requested a temporary injunction to prevent any current or former board members from accessing HOA funds until a full audit could be completed. I finally took a walk down that road late that Sunday evening with Celia and Carla. "The silence feels different now," Carla said. "Not tense, just clean." Celia looked up at the sky. "It's like the whole neighborhood took a breath." The real surprise came on Monday morning. A letter arrived at my house, hand-delivered in a plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a typed statement, unsigned but unmistakably written by Greg Talbot. The letter detailed how the board had been manipulated by Phyllis, how votes were faked or quietly skipped, and how she threatened to destroy anyone who asked too many questions. He included a copy of an internal email where Phyllis explicitly ordered Greg to shut down any objections to the speed bump project, even if it meant fabricating community support. I brought the letter straight to Tasha Marlin, the DA's investigator. She took one look at the email and nodded. "This will help," she said. "It confirms a pattern of coercion and cover-up. We'll add it to the case file." At the preliminary hearing the next week, Phyllis looked nothing like the iron-fisted woman who once waved a clipboard on my driveway. She wore a wrinkled blouse and avoided eye contact with everyone in the courtroom. Her attorney entered a not guilty plea, but the judge denied bail again, citing risk of evidence tampering and community disruption. The judge also approved a motion to appoint a state-appointed receiver to temporarily manage Willow Creek's HOA finances. That meant no more secret budgets, no more backdoor deals. Everything would go through the receiver and the new oversight committee. At the next community meeting, Celia stood in front of the crowd and did something no one expected. She asked for volunteers. Not to rebuild the old HOA, she clarified, but to create something better. A resident council, no dues, no fines, just people keeping each other informed. "We don't need a power structure, we just need transparency." Hands went up all over the room. The vote passed unanimously. Dana stayed on to help the new council draft a neighborhood charter, not a governing document, but a cooperative agreement. It laid out shared responsibilities, how to report issues, and how to hold informal monthly meetings. No board, no president, just neighbors. A few weeks later, I got a letter from the county clerk's office. It confirmed that our road was formally exempt from any future HOA jurisdiction. A protective covenant had been filed on behalf of the property owners, barring any future annexation or interference from Willow Creek or any other association. Celia framed a copy of the document and hung it in her hallway. That summer, the 6 of us who owned the road pooled together for a new street sign. Not a regulation one, just something to mark the change. It read, "Cooper's Lane privately maintained by the people who live here." We had a small block party the day it went up, no speeches, no formalities. Just folding chairs, grilled burgers, and laughter that didn't sound strained for the first time in years. Carla leaned over during dinner and said, "You know, most people would have just let the speed bumps go." I shrugged. "I figured if they were willing to break the law for that, what else were they hiding?" She grinned. Turned out to be a lot. And that was the end of it. No more fake invoices, no more forged documents, no more people playing God with other people's homes. Just a road, a neighborhood, and a hard-earned peace. All because we didn't back down.